All right, we're going to be working on this activity here today to basically get you connected to a remote database so that we can complete one of the assignments inside of Unit 7. Um, because we run our servers for the data analytics program at the IMET Center in Sturtevant. And normally, if we were in the classroom together, the machines would literally be in the next room behind a glass wall. And so we could actually go and look at the machine that we're connecting to and even touch it if you wanted. Um, and the connections from the classroom environment to the database server are pretty simple because physically we are on the same network. And and so if you are sitting in the classroom on one of the school computers, you would be able to remote connect to the database directly by just simply adding the IP address into Excel and making sure you have the right connection software included with Excel. Unfortunately, we are all working remotely, and then we have the other issue where there's a homework assignment attached to this, which you'll be working on your own. So you'll have to perform these steps remotely, and whenever you're off campus, the problem is that most of the, you know, I'd say sensitive services that we have on our network, and databases are one of them, are behind a firewall. And in order to be able to access those resources, you have to have a secure connection to campus. Now, typically we use a piece of software called VPN to do something like this. And I'm going to very carefully just do a quick little Google search here on VPN. And what is VPN? And basically, if you guys have heard this terminology before, VPN is an acronym that stands for Virtual Private Network, as you see on the screen here. The point of it really is that you allow traffic over the public internet to go from one machine to a secure location, but the traffic is encrypted in transit, so you cannot decipher it if you were to intercept the traffic. And a lot of people aren't aware of this, but most of our internet traffic, at least traditionally, has been insecure. So when you guys are on a website and you type a search or something, that is something that somebody can intercept in transit. So if they were monitoring your network, running the right piece of software, such as Wireshark, for example, if you're curious about that one, you can always download that. It's a free download. It's used by hackers and IT professionals alike. And this is the software. I mistyped it in the search, but this is the software. And it allows you to capture on a network every packet of information that travels over that network and allows you to look inside. And if the traffic is not encrypted, you can pull things out such as usernames, passwords, account numbers, whatever the person is typing. Now, fortunately, most websites that you go to, when you see the little lock here, the information is secured in transit, hypothetically. So you never, for example, enter a credit card number on a website where the lock is not enabled, right? And I hope you guys are aware of that. However, we need to connect securely to the Gateway campus for the same reason. Now, the reason we do this is the servers sit behind a firewall, and there's no way to access certain resources without. So here's what we have to do. We have to get the right software to connect. So in advance of this class, I went ahead and asked our IT department to enable all of your student accounts to have VPN access. That's not something that's automatically given, by the way. It's only on an as-needed basis for very specific IT programs that get this access. And so the credentials that you will use to log into the VPN service, which we'll go to in just a moment, will be the same ones that you use to log into your email account and Blackboard. So typically it's your student ID number and then whatever password you have set. Now, as you guys are also aware, Gateway has recently moved to this multi-factor authentication system called One Login. Are all of you guys currently using One Login to get into your accounts? All right, so I see one person nodding, so I assume that's a yes for everybody. The VPN service also operates with that tool. That was actually a recent addition to the VPN service. In fact, it happened just last week, by the way. And so I'm glad it happened before we got to this unit. And if you guys remember last week, I was talking about how things were changing, and fortunately they did it right before this class started, so that's good. All right, so here's how we get the VPN software that we need. Now, some of you may already use VPN software. Is there anybody here that uses VPN software for different reasons? Charles, what do you use it for, if I may ask?
I mostly just use mine when I'm traveling, or not at home. Like if I'm at like public Wi-Fi or like a coffee place, I don't really use it at home very often, but I definitely use it if I'm like on a public Wi-Fi.
Okay, and that's good to know. Is that a service that you pay for?
I got like a really good deal and got like 2 years for like $35. Probably a year and a half ago. It's probably gonna renew at like some way higher price. But yeah, I paid like not a lot, but yeah.
Okay, well, thank you. And anybody else use VPN service currently? Okay, so I know you guys are seeing my screen right now. I do use one also for private purposes, mind you. And this is the product that I use. It's called Windscribe, and this is not a pay service, by the way. I did a lot of research to find a free service that offered good performance and a reasonable amount of download per month. So they give me 10 gigs a month of download for free, and you can see I have mine configured where I usually will connect to England, right? But there's a bunch of different countries on the planet that you can connect to. Now, what happens is when I flip this switch here, my internet connection now will grab a IP address from overseas or whatever country I designate. And some people are like, well, why the heck do you need to do that? Well, here's a couple of reasons. Some people do like what Charles does, which is they'll actually do VPN and VPN through their own country, but in order to secure communications in transit. In coffee shops, Charles, that's a wonderful example of when to use a VPN because there's there's so many people that get hacked at coffee shops. So people like go to log into Wi-Fi, not realizing they're logging into somebody else's laptop and they're capturing all their traffic and passwords and whatnot. Um, Another reason to use a VPN service is, for example, for those of you that might subscribe to like Netflix. Netflix is a really good example of this, where you would connect here in the United States to Netflix, and you are presented with certain titles that you can watch if you subscribe. Unbeknownst to a lot of people here in the United States, if I connect through Europe and bring up Netflix, all of a sudden I can see all this stuff I don't normally see in the United States. So that's one reason why people use it, by the way. Another reason is if you're doing, activities that might not be considered completely legal, people often use VPN services too. So let's say illegal downloading of software, that type of thing, or BitTorrent. Pornography, things that can be on the nefarious side. Um, and I'm not promoting any of those activities, but it is a useful type of software in some scenarios for doing certain types of tasks and working around some locks and keys that people place on your system. So, for example, if I was on campus and I wanted to search for Tor, right? We talked about Tor a little bit, I think, and maybe it was another class, but the Onion router. And if I went to their website, so on my system, I can go to the website. Try this on Gateway's network. You get locked down and you get bumped off the network if you try to go to this website, by the way. And, you know, there's a lot of reasons for that. People sometimes protect their networks from unnecessary bandwidth usage. So, for example, if you're at work, you might have Netflix blocked at work because they don't want you watching Netflix while you're at work, right? And so, what do people do? Is they download VPN software. They create a secure encrypted tunnel out of the network to the public internet. And so, for example, like Nick, right now, I'm looking at you because you're pretty fresh out of high school, right? And so, like one thing that I know about high school students, for example, is they bring their phones to school and they connect to the Wi-Fi and they can't do anything, right? You can't go to YouTube, you can't go to Netflix, you can't like Instagram or whatever, right? And so, what do people do?
My school district was so strict that we couldn't connect to the Wi-Fi at all. I
Oh,
mean, I found a way around that personally, but
yeah. Well, Nick, that doesn't surprise me. But what a lot of high school students do is they load VPN software, and so not only are they tunneling through and getting their Facebook, their Instagram, and their whatever, they're also doing other things that probably the school admins don't want them to do. Um, Now, and I'm not promoting any of those activities. I'm just telling you scenarios in which people do use VPN. Another really good example is if like you're an office worker and maybe you're working and maybe you're not allowed to site while you're working, and they don't want you like shopping while you're supposed to be doing your functional tasks. So people will VPN out, connect up, do their shopping or whatever they want to do, their Facebook, and everything, works basically. All right, so let's get to the point where we're installing it here on our machine. We are connecting to Gateway in order to get the software we need to connect. Now, interestingly, there's lots of third-party software you can download for free. That's VPN. Windows and most major operating systems also include VPN clients that can be configured to connect to whatever network you want. And a lot of VPNs allow you to use that software. However, Gateway does not. You cannot use a generic VPN client to connect to Gateway. It has to be a very specific product. The product is called Cisco AnyConnect. And I'm just going to, search for it here so you can see what the product is. However, if you download this from Cisco and try to connect to Gateway, guess what happens? It doesn't work. So you have to download it through Gateway from Gateway's interface in order for the software that you download to have the right components inside of it with the right magic keys to allow you into the network. There's no other way to do it. And the only way to get to the download is if you have a VPN account established, like what I established for you guys. So all of us here in the session do have an account created. All right, so here's how you access it. I'm going to drop this link in the chat first, and then I'll put it in the browser. It is an HTTPS address, so that's why I'm actually typing it for you, just so you don't omit that part. Because if you don't put that in, you cannot connect. So here is the link in the chat window. I'm going to click on it myself and go to the link. And once you get connected up, you will see this particular screen. You will need to log on. And once again, you're going to use the standard credentials you use for email and Blackboard. So student ID number for username, whatever your password is. Now, I'm already logged in through one login, and it wants me, it's texting me right now, but guess what? I'm in the basement, and I can't get my text. Normally, I have to run upstairs, literally, to get my text messages. But I also have this other service connected, and you guys can add this one too. This is a piece of software you can add to your mobile device called One Login Protect that allows you to authenticate without the text message. So watch what happens here.
It actually gives me 4 options.
Okay, well, you might have other authenticators logged in. So you might have like the Google Authenticator, and there's a couple of other private ones. Yeah. I just got a message on my phone here, and well, those of you that are looking at the chat window, this is kind of what it looks like, and it has a little accept button on it, and I just accept it on my phone, and it's letting me in that way.
Is there any reason to not choose one of the other options? Like, would you suggest using the text for now, or doesn't matter?
Anthony, you use whatever one works.
Gotcha.
And whatever is best for you. I use the One Login Protect because I ran into this early on when they switched to One Login. I would be sitting here, and every time it would like ask me for text, and I'd be like in the middle of a Zoom session with a class like this. And I'm like, hold on a second. And I'd be running upstairs, waiting for 30 seconds for whatever for it to come in, and then run back downstairs, and 5 minutes of class was wasted, So once you get into the system, right, you will get this screen to download the client. So go ahead and choose download for Windows and pull down the client, unless of course you're on a Mac or a Linux machine, and then choose the one that's appropriate for your platform. All right. Once we get to the point here where somebody has pulled down the executable, could I kindly ask that you don't race ahead and install it? I want one volunteer to share their screen to show the process. Anybody game on doing that?
Ty,
Sounds fine to me.
Yeah, I will. All right.
Okay.
Whatever you want, doesn't matter.
All right, everybody's volunteering. Now, Nick, were you having a problem?
No, I just said I've got mine up. I'm ready to share if you want me.
Okay.
I'm having a problem. I guess I didn't get that screen when I logged in.
Okay. Charles, why don't you share your screen with me real quick? I'm going to pause the recording for a moment. All right. So right now what we're looking at on the screen is one of the students is sharing their screen. Thank you, Nick. I appreciate it. And he's on a Windows machine. If you are on a Mac, by the way, and we have at least one Mac person here in the group, I would ask you to hang tight because we'll walk you through it too on the Mac platform, and it would be good to record that as well. But you will get this screen here that will ask you to proceed with the setup. So after you've downloaded it and launched the installer, go ahead and click next. You'll see this is a pretty quick and easy install. You do have to accept the license terms. And I'm sure
Looks
you
good
read
to me.
every word of that, right?
Looks good to me.
It said free somewhere in there, right? Something
Okay.
about firstborn.
There we go.
All right. It's a very, very quick and easy install. All right.
Okay.
Go ahead and click the finish button.
Yep.
And I'm going to, now that it's finished, I want to get you connected, Nick. All right. So let's
Perfect.
go. But I want you to hang tight on that. Maybe it's smarter right now to switch over to Arnie's screen. Arnie, why don't you, Nick, stop sharing. Arnie, start sharing. And now all your faces are in the video, though. I'm giving you this fair warning. They just appeared in the video for just a moment. Thank you, Arnie. All right, let's click through on the installation process for you. So you already downloaded it, double-click the installer. Go ahead and click continue. This should be just as quick on your platform. All right, different look to the installer, same net effect. All right, now notice what this just did to Arnie. And Arnie, this is one of the reasons why I wanted you to share this, right? Because when you are on a Mac platform and this happens, kind of an extra layer of security, you do need to go to your preferences panel and just go ahead, click the button. It'll open up your preferences. And you want to move this window out of the way and respond to that message and just say, okay. All right. Now, uncheck the lock in your preference panel there. And go ahead and put in your password. All right. And then see the box in there that says allow? Yeah, you want to click that. All right. And so this is kind of interesting. Yeah, you want to allow that, right? Because Gateway requires it, by the way. And now that you've made that change, re-click the lock in your preferences panel so you don't undo that. Well, this is a security feature. This is kind of interesting. You know, some people are like, why are Macs more secure? Because they have features like this. So like if the app is not registered through the App Store on an Apple platform, you know, which is kind of interesting because it comes from Oracle, you think it would be, they won't let it run until you approve that inside the security panel there. So just a couple extra layers of security on a Mac that make it a little more secure. All right, Arnie, thank you for sharing your screen. Why don't you relinquish the screen now? And Nick, would you share your screen again, if you don't mind? Thank you. All right, so now we have the screen to connect. And what we need to type into the box here is the same URL we had before, minus the HTTPS. So you're just going to put in VPN-home.
Okay.
You just type it in. It's pretty easy. .gtc.edu. Now, when you click the connect button here, you will get the one login prompt here. So,
Are we good to follow along with this?
yes, please do.
Okay.
Please follow along. So you're going to use your standard one login credentials. And Nick, you took it off screen. Is that what you did?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
I hope you don't mind.
No, not at all. And in fact, I was going to encourage you to do that. So I'm glad that you are intuitive about your security, especially since this will end up on YouTube and it will be searchable. What is Nick's password, right?
So what do we put at ready to connect? I missed that part.
Well, I'll tell you what, Arnie, if you missed that part, why don't you just hang tight to where you're,
All right,
where you're
no
at and
problem.
we'll come back.
Yeah.
It looks like I'm connecting right now.
Yep. And as the connection happens, what literally will happen is you might
Also connecting.
lose the session momentarily, but ultimately you are connected now. And then normally you will get a little message in your system tray too.
Yep, I
Nick?
did, but I'm sharing my second monitor, so it didn't pull up for you guys.
Right. We don't see your system tray. We see your second screen interface. All right.
Yes.
Nick, why don't you disconnect for a second? Let's pull Arnie up on the screen so we get both a Mac and a PC view of this, which is awesome.
You got it.
And Arnie, why don't you go ahead and share? And let's see where you're at. So you're doing your GitHub stuff there.
Second.
Now, Arnie, you notice way up at the top of your window, there is the MySQL icon. Yeah, there it is. It's already running. You need to type in the address now, which is VPN. Yeah, it should be all lowercase, by the way. -home.
The underscore.
No. Dash. Same key, not shift. Yeah, there you go. home.gtc.edu. All right, go ahead and click connect. And now you will go through the one login process also. And then once you are connected, you will, and you can see it up in your system tray already, which is at the top of your window. There's a little icon and it's got an exclamation point in there. So make sure that you get connected. Once you are connected, you will see that icon up at the top of your Apple menu at the top will have a lock appear on it. And right now, Arnie, I'm going to stop your sharing,
Okay.
by the way. And I am going to share my screen. So your faces are being moved away. And let me get my screen up on screen. All right, so here we go. And you'll notice that that will appear in your system tray when it's running. You notice that mine right now is just the circular icon. But I need to establish a connection. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. When I do the connection, by the way, it will momentarily hiccup. You guys might actually lose me in the connection, but it should be almost instantaneous. So I'm going to go through the process of connecting. It will do the one login thing with me. And I actually have to type my password here. How darn cumbersome. And I have a minimum 14 character password, so that's why it's a little more cumbersome. And once again, I have to do the one login thing here. So you can see how seriously they take this. They really don't want these systems hacked. And that should authenticate me. So I just authenticated on my phone and I am now connected. You notice it gave me a message showing I'm connected. And then when I look at my icon in the system tray down here, it will show connected. And if I double click it, it'll bring it up and show that I am connected and secured. Arnie, for you, since you're on a Mac, that same icon will be at the top of your screen up here somewhere. And you will see that. Now, this is something I use very often for connecting to school resources. So I have certain systems, for example, when I post grades or when I'm working on any of our servers and remote controlling them or upgrading them or whatever, I have to connect to VPN. Databases for very logical reasons are behind firewalls. We don't want people hacking those. But now that you guys have the connection, this is probably the most difficult step of all of this, is just getting this part to work. Is everybody successful in doing this? All right, so now that we have the connection, now comes the fun part, the part that actually pertains to our work. Interestingly, I just want one additional side note. Whenever you guys end up working, professionally doing this task, and you perform these particular functions, which in my mind would be pretty normal functions for a data analyst, log into the database, pull down a table or 2 or 10 or 20 or whatever, drop them into Excel or Tableau or Power BI or whatever tool you're using, and start to do your analysis, your data cleansing, all those tasks. But if you were working for a private company, most likely all their databases would be behind firewalls and would also require VPN to connect. And in some cases, even higher level control. All right, let's go ahead and launch Excel now. Get it up on the screen. And functionally, what I'm trying to do is work through this activity. So we basically have completed these steps here to get on the VPN. I do want to make special note, and I plan to go back and kind of do a little bit more highlights and bolding and italicizing and make this look a little prettier so it's easier to read. But the IP address that we will be connecting to is the one that's listed here. Now I want to show you something kind of interesting because I'm going to copy that IP address. And if you happen to paste that IP address into your browser now that you are connected to Gateway, you should be able to pull up our SharePoint server with a login screen. Now, you won't be able to connect because you guys don't have accounts, right? But you know what? I do. I just don't remember what my damn password is. But you would be able to access our SharePoint server. And one of the things I hope to do with this class, and we will experiment with this as well, is I will create some data content that will be loaded on SharePoint, but I will need to create accounts for you guys to get onto the server. And then we should be able to pull data directly from SharePoint into the work that we do. And I think that's pretty exciting. But for right now, we do not have SharePoint accounts. But this is a public-facing URL. Well, it's not public-facing, but it's an internal URL. And then once you're on the system, and let me see if I can actually get logged in. It's probably not a bad thing for you guys to see what it looks like, but I need to remember what the darn password is. That's my issue. And yes, I have to keep spreadsheets of them because I just have so many passwords to manage for so many systems. Okay, so here we go. And hopefully that is not correct. Maybe I just mistyped that. All right, so it's not anything particularly sensitive or anything that we have here, but this will wake up our SharePoint server here. Yes, I am going to save my password on this one. And it should, there we go. All right, so this is the home page of our data analytics SharePoint server. And this is a virtualized server, you know, not getting into the details of what that means, but this is a SharePoint platform that we have complete and total control over. And so we will be experimenting with it. And it's kind of a useful piece of information in a lot of different ways. A lot of companies that are really heavily vested into the Microsoft infrastructure platforms. And what I'm talking about is Microsoft servers and Microsoft email systems and Microsoft databases, and in some cases, Microsoft cloud platforms. And usually Microsoft Office 365. And then SharePoint really becomes a product that's kind of integrated with all of those cloud platforms. And interestingly, this is a kind of a privatized server platform for our data analytics students. But as regular Gateway students, if you're curious about SharePoint, you can go to your Office and see, I can't even type today. I just want to go to office.com here. Let's try that again. And then when you get logged into Office 365 through your browser, and you go to the area where they show all the apps, so you go to all apps, and actually SharePoint was already listed there. You will see SharePoint as an entry here too. So if you're curious about learning about SharePoint as a platform, which is kind of a monster in and of itself, real frankly, this is something that is available to you right through Office 365 for free through Gateway. And chances are we'll try to experiment with this. I don't know how much time we'll have to really get into this, but as you move forward through the program, we will be visiting this platform every once in a while to pull data, create data, and the like. The other interesting thing I do want to point out is in the app list of Office 365, where normally we used to find Microsoft Access that you could download and install, they now call it Lists. And this actually has a strange connection to SharePoint. So lists are kind of the primary data structure of SharePoint. And when I was exploring, I was looking for access, and I'm like, where did access go? And I came in here, and I started to realize that if I wanted to create a new list, I was like, what is list? And then I realized, okay, this is their database product now. And so this is something that we could also pull data from if we can, like created a small database here. We could pull data directly from this platform right into Excel. We could pull it right into SharePoint, and we can pull from both of those into Excel and actually go the other direction as well. Really bizarre products. The one thing that I find particularly fascinating about SharePoint as a platform, when it's configured correctly, and this is a caveat, when it's configured correctly, you have the ability to actually take spreadsheets, embed them directly into the SharePoint website, and live edit documents right through the browser interface. And that's a really, really cool thing. And I don't know how many companies really actively use these platforms. I think some of them are frankly bedazzled by the complexity of them because they're so deep and so rich and so powerful. And we used to formally teach SharePoint here as a platform, so I know quite a bit about it. And even though I've taught it for a number of years, it still perplexes me even with the complexity of what's possible within it. Most people say SharePoint and they're like, I don't know what that is, just leave me alone. And they walk away. But it is a really powerful platform that can be used to do a lot of different types of things, and we will visit it. All right, so let's go now to Excel. So now that we have explored what SharePoint is and what's on the URL web-wise, that URL will now be used to retrieve data, so that IP address technically. So go ahead and create yourself a blank workbook. And at this point, you totally want to follow along with the steps. So make sure you get Excel up and running. Anthony, I see you raised your hand.
Yeah, I wanted to bring this up that I actually did have a VPN on my browser. So when I went to go, even to just Google, it wouldn't let me connect to anything because both of them were on at the same time.
Yeah, you have to. You can't run two VPN services at the same time.
Yeah, I didn't realize it was still on. So.
Yeah, what's kind of interesting about that is if I run my private one, this one, and I turn it on, it always brings this one up to try to connect at the same time. Maybe that's what happened to you. Yeah. So you have to disconnect one and then reconnect the other. But that's actually a really good point. Thank you for bringing it up. All right. So now that we're in Excel, here's where the fun is, folks. Let's go to the Data tab, and then go ahead and click on Get Data. We're going to choose the option now that says From Database, and we are going to select the topmost option, which is From a SQL Server Database. Now, on the Macintosh, Arnie, I know that you're on a Mac. I think you might have a slightly different interface. And if you feel lost or you're not finding your way, just don't hang tight. I'll come back and help you. We'll circle back. We'll make sure you're okay. But I'm thinking it should be pretty much the same. All right. So go ahead and click on SQL Server Database, and it's going to bring up a dialog box. Fairly simplistic one. And you notice it does a little bit of thinking in the background. This is not a light feature, by the way. The server that we're going to connect to, we're simply going to indicate the IP address of the server. And just to reiterate, internally to Gateway, the IP address is 10.17.2.110. If I knew the exact name of the database I was connecting to, I could type it in. I'm not going to do that. I'm leaving it blank on purpose. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this Advanced Options tab, and I'm just going to look. I'm not setting anything here. I just want you to be aware of what's going on here. And I want you to notice that if you knew your database by name, like very specifically by name, and the table, or just the database, you could also send it directly a SQL command right from this interface. So you could run a query and have it pull back the data that you want in advance of connecting. We are not using these options right now. We're just connecting to the server. So put in that IP address and click OK. All right, see it's thinking on it a little bit, and then it will bring up a secondary window here that now shows me all the databases that are attached to the server that we're connecting to.
So I'm actually getting a window asking about credentials.
I'm getting the same window as you, Anthony.
All right, so you guys are going to hang tight right there. All right, so we're going to circle back and solve that problem. And so what I have to do from the server side, and I will demonstrate that all on screen for you, by the way, in just a moment, is I need to set permissions so you guys can get in. Right now, you guys are not allowed in, but that will come in just a moment, so just hang tight. So what we are ultimately going to connect to is, you see I have a table here, or actually, excuse me, a database named DA1, Data Analytics 1 Sample. And I was just goofing around with this last week. And normally what you would do is you would come in here, you'll expand the list to see all the databases that are database tables actually that I have connected here. And the exercise or the activity that we're doing, I'm just having you pull down this raw data table. And you see as I click on it, it very much like the Excel standard import tool shows you what it looks like. It shows you that it's reading the data directly from the database. So I'm conceptually here, folks, I'm sitting in the city of Milwaukee, right? On the northeast side, and I am remote connecting to a server database inside the data analytics server rack down at IMET in Sturtevant, right? I'm tunneled in through VPN. I've connected successfully to the database. I can see some of the database in the table. And I have the option on the screen here, by the way, where I can just load it directly into Excel, which is what I'm going to do. Or if I wanted, I could pull up the Transform Data tool, which launches the Power Query Editor and then allows us to do, like set column headers, remove blank lines, all those things that we saw in that tool. I'm just going to go ahead and hit load and show you the end result of this. And then we will circle back and make sure everybody's accounts are okay. All right, so here we are with the data. If you're curious about what this data is, this is the per capita income per country planet-wide. So all countries on the planet are listed as of 2004. All right, so this is what this information is, and it comes from a public-facing website that's easily accessible. I loaded it into a table on SQL Server so that we would have some data to pull down and manipulate. I do see a couple of issues here, like the column headers aren't really ideal, but the information did successfully get transported in and is quite readable. And so now once we're in Excel, we can do all the things that we know how to do with our data. All right, so here's what I'm going to do next is I'm going to pause this recording because it will not be of keen interest to people watching this on the internet, how I set user accounts inside of SQL Server. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this on screen for you guys because I think it's a valuable thing to watch, even if you're maybe struggling conceptually with what I'm doing. But I think it's interesting to learn about because you very likely will face issues like this when you're working with remote databases. So like if this is the first time you're connecting, you're kind of expecting, oh, Ty had this all figured out and he had it all working. I guess I wasn't smart enough to think about the fact that you all need user accounts here. So we're going to set those up right now. So the recording is being paused. All right, so now we're going to have one of the students connect up to the system, and we realized, if you were watching the video, that the students didn't have accounts, so it made it difficult for them to connect. And I'm just going to put a little caveat out there right now. This still might fail. I did create student accounts for everybody, but I am now realizing, and I'm going to pause this video in just a second here, I also have to give you guys permission in the database for each user account. So I'm going to pause the video for a moment and make that adjustment. We're now watching Anthony try to connect here, and I am aware of the fact that we might have a possible failure with the connection. You saw him choose get data from database, SQL Server. Now he's going to put the IP address in for the server, which is 10.17. There you go. Just go ahead and click OK. And this is, you're going to use your alternate credentials, right? So you're going to use your first initial last name.
Should I try the prefix you had?
No, let's go without the prefix. It should work without, but if it doesn't, then we'll go from there. And just remember what password I assigned to you. Go ahead and There you go. All right, so now let's try adding that prefix. So the prefix before your username would be in all caps GTC. Yep, you got it. You're making my life easy there, Anthony. All right, and it's still denying you. Okay.
Yep.
So let's. Yeah.
I'm just gonna full out retype it again. Yeah. And
Okay, so the 4-letter prefix there, only the first letter is capital, not all of them.
this.
No. On the password.
Oh, only the first one. Gotcha.
Yeah, only the first.
Okay.
Only the first letter is capital. Hopefully this works. All right, so just Anthony, hang right there.
Sure.
All right, so I'm going to pause the video once again. I'm going to see if I can add your user account. So just bear with me. This will just should only take moments. I will share my screen so you guys can watch me though, because I think it's interesting. Yep, go ahead and put in the IP. We'll do a database login, and I'm going to give you guys the password here. So here you're going to use data-student, and the password is all uppercase GTC D, and then lowercase ATA and 2020. Yeah, you're still showing cap locks on though.
I didn't think that mattered for letters, but
Yeah, just click OK. It actually does matter for letters. It is case sensitive.
okay.
Absolutely.
Or I meant for numbers. Sorry.
Yeah.
Because the last is 2020, right?
Right, but the ATA of data is lowercase.
Okay, could you repeat it again?
GTC data, GTC and the letter D are all uppercase.
Okay, and then
ATA.
is not okay.
Yep, and then 2020.
Right.
All right, so that's a really good sign. All right, now you can go to the sample database. Expand. Choose raw data 2004.
Yep.
Fantastic. Go ahead and load it up. All right, and that's the activity, folks. So,
Gotcha.
all right, well, that was like pulling teeth. So let's see if we can get everybody to do this. So once again, does somebody else want to share screens and try it?
Yeah, I wouldn't mind because
It worked for me just fine, just so you know.
Okay. Yeah, Arnie, why don't you go ahead and share? Let's see if we can coach you through.
So, question about that.
Sure.
I hit connect and I loaded this. Is my connection now done? For now?
It's done. You loaded it into Excel. You have the data you need, and yes, the connection is now done. We're not running a live.
Excel doesn't keep it up. Okay.
Yeah, well, we can. That's a separate issue.
Yeah, but for what I did, it's okay.
All right, now Arnie's got a little bit different screen. So he's on a Mac. And so what we're going to do, Arnie, the only thing you really need to change here, see where it says method? Yep. Oh, okay.
so you use what I use for data for SQL because this is what I use for.
Yeah, don't use what you use for your regular database class. This is different.
Okay.
So yeah, so we don't care about that.
Cool.
Not that it's not a good product. All right,
Yeah.
so you want to put in data-student. And I'm not sure if we got locked up here because I don't see.
You don't see my screen?
Yeah, I got the letters D, A, and then my screen locked up here. So I don't know if I'm locked up.
Mine's pretty good.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, okay, you're fine. So the password is GTC uppercase. Then data, the D is uppercase. And then 2020. And and hopefully this will work. Hopefully this is database connect. Okay, so this is a great sign. And notice with Arnie, this is kind of interesting. He's only being shown the one he has permission for. Isn't that interesting? So go ahead and hit the little expander next to DA1SS. Select, yep, open up sample. And we want raw data 2004. Slightly different interface. And notice really what it's doing is it's running a query, right? So you can actually run, yeah, you don't want to change that. You want to leave that alone. Go ahead and run it. Let's see what it pulls back, because I assume this is what's happening in the background. Excellent. All right. It looks good to me. Go ahead and click return data. And Arnie, I think you're going to be okay. Sure. That seems like a great spot to put it. All right. And you have been successful. And so now we've seen it both on a Mac and a PC. And has everybody else gotten this to work? Nick, you said you're okay. Alex, Charles?
Yep, all good.
Fantastic. All right. So that was the hard part, is making that first connection. Now the
that
homework.
was all through the test sign in, right?
Correct. All right. So now we get to the homework. So the database homework assignment is this: to make that same connection, but this time pull down the Netflix titles. Does anybody want to demonstrate that? Now you guys are all being recorded on the screen. Who wants to share
If
this?
you want me to again.
Yeah, Anthony.
I can do the same as well.
All right, let's let Anthony do it since he's kind of in the mode. I think he's got his finger poised on the share button.
Yep.
Excellent. All right, let's go ahead and do another connection.
The bar's in the way.
Yeah, those darn like Zoom bars. All right. You want me to read it to you? 10.
I got it.
All right.
I just had to
Copy paste it.
Yep.
All right, and then
Oh, so okay. So I didn't have to put in my sign in this time.
right, it remembers,
Switch
and that's
Okay.
exactly what confused me, because I did it so long ago. It's been weeks now that yeah, we don't want that first one. You notice that one's empty.
Titles. Yep.
All right, so go ahead and load the data.
Just straight up. Oh yeah, it already has the column names and okay.
Now this is pretty interesting, because we're going to talk about this in a little bit, provided we have the time to do it, and we're kind of running out. But this is not a bogus data file. This is a data file that is shared on Kaggle. So Netflix publishes their title list, and this is very accurate as of when I downloaded it, which was like a week or two ago, of
Okay.
all the titles that you can get on Netflix. This is a complete list of everything on Netflix, and I don't know how many entries there are. How big is this spreadsheet? Like 10,000, 8,000, something like that. I forget. But if you
I'm just gonna
all the way down
scroll
to
it.
the bottom,
Yeah.
it looks about 8,000 titles. So whenever you say, "Hey, I can't find anything on Netflix to watch," you probably aren't looking hard.
Yeah.
Well, the problem really is that they only show you so many titles when you're searching, right? And they kind of qualify it. Now the assignment, if you read it, is to get this far. So this is a big step of just getting it into Excel to begin with. But I want you to find shows that are only TV shows only. So let's start by filtering. So let's only find TV shows. Now
Okay.
let's find ones that originate in Brazil. And so if you scroll over in the columns, you'll notice that there should be a country column somewhere. I think you passed it, maybe.
Okay. Well, I'll do it slower.
There it is. Oh,
Yeah, it's not loving it. Okay. So we have country, and then we said just which one did you say? Brazil.
Brazil?
And then, do you count this or no?
No.
No. So we'll just do Brazil. I unselected all of them.
Right. All right. So now we're looking for ones that were released in 2020.
This year, do the same thing.
And then if you could, you can just arrange your screen strategically here and show me the titles are the ones that I'm concerned with. And, you know, arguably, if you wanted, the other thing that you could do is you could like narrow up these columns. So you could narrow up C and B and D and whatever. And I'm not really so much interested in all the information about this, right? Like the cast and stuff. I mostly just want to see that information, the 2020 Brazil and TV show. That's really what I'm looking for. So if you screenshot this, or you know, better yet, you don't need to screenshot it. You can just save the Excel file as is with this filter engaged and turn it in. And that's the assignment, folks. As you can see, the hard part of it is just the connecting. And you know what? Here's the funny part about all this. SQL Server is the easy one to connect to.
Yeah, that scares me.
Yeah, it should scare you a little bit. It's the easy one to connect to, but we had issues with accounts and permissions and, you know, hey, you know, it's all part of a process, and it happens that way. But this is basically the database assignment, which is worth, I think, a couple, 2-3 points. So that completes this one. Is everybody okay with this? Everybody getting it to work?
You said
I'm good
that
to go.
Yeah.
we turn in the Excel file?
Yep. Submit the completed Excel file
Okay.
with the filters enabled, if you don't mind.
Ty, do you mind sending in the chat the server name, the username, and the password, please? Because I have to redo it every time I have to put that in every time I want to connect to extract some new data.
Okay. Could somebody kindly type that up and throw it in the chat window?
You're looking for the login credentials, right?
Correct. Yeah, the server name, username, password, and stuff.
Let me give you.
There's the IP address. Charles just put in the username and the password. And I just put in the IP address, Arnie. And then the name of the database is DA1 sample.
Could you explain what you were saying about his only being able to see that one? You kind of mentioned it, but I didn't quite follow.
You know what? Actually, why don't we have Arnie share his screen again? Could you do that for us, Arnie? Share your screen. Thank you, sir. So, yeah. So for Arnie, he, for whatever reason, I don't know why the Mac version is different. It doesn't seem to be saving it. But type in the IP address, which is 10.17. That's for the server name. 10.1. No. 10.17.2.110. Okay. And then there you are going to enter data-student, all lowercase. And then the password is GTC, all uppercase, data with a capital D and 2020. All right. And so, Anthony, this is what you're talking about right here. Now, the way that I set up the permissions, he doesn't have access to any of the other databases, right? Now, the reality is you guys don't either. So when you guys see that big, huge list, there's no way you're going to pull data back from the other pieces. Arnie just has a different interface because it's on a Mac, basically. All right. And Arnie, did you grab the Netflix one this time?
Yes.
See you in a minute.
Yeah, we'll find out in a second, won't we? Given how long it's taking, I assume so, right? Because you got to keep in mind it's like 8,000 lines with like 20 columns each, and no shortage of data. So just be patient.
Looks like he has another sheet open in the background as well.
Oh, there you go. He's got it. All right. So Arnie, let's start by doing some filtering then. So in column B, the filter tool is already enabled just because of the import. Yeah, just select TV show. All right. And then let's find the country column. So close this box. There you go. You know, as cumbersome as it is, you know, seeing somebody do it on a Mac is really helpful. And I don't know if like everybody else feels that way, but so few of us really get to see how a Mac operates. And I don't usually teach off of my Macs because nobody has one, or very few people do. Unselect all there, Arnie. Go back to your filter. Click the box that says select all to unselect all, and now find Brazil. All right. Close that box. Now we're going to go to the column H and choose the 2020 release year. So why might somebody do a search like this? Because they want they're from Brazil, speak Portuguese, I guess, and want to watch only brand new shows from Brazil that are on Netflix. And so now you can go through the process of kind of making your columns narrower and getting it all visible, you know. But from the flip side is, you know, if you have access to lists like this, you can do some kind of powerful searching that you can't do on the Netflix site, right? But it's interesting to think that Netflix probably uses this very file when you're running in the search window and you're searching for an actor or a name or a country. It probably is querying this file. And I think it's really fascinating to think about. You know, somebody manages this list. And so I think it's really, really kind of interesting. And then, you know, every show's got its own unique ID, you know, and I think that's really pretty darn cool. So Arnie, it looks like you got it working. All you have to do is kind of pretty it up, like make those columns narrower, and you're all set. All right, let's turn our attention now to like the other course materials now that we're basically out of time. And a couple of you were working on some stuff, and Nick, you know, you were unusually ambitious last week. Like the moment we ended class, Nick, you know, and you're smiling about it too. Nick went ahead and started working on the homework immediately, and started asking me questions about it, only to discover that we had some issues with the homework and how it was listed. So I want to address that first with the limited time that we have. And so there's kind of a series of exercises that happen inside this document. Of course, it comes up on screen number 2, and still. All right, let's pull that over. And so here's my computer locking up while I'm trying to move from screen to screen. So there's got to be something with the video card, I'm thinking. And so I'm locked up here again, folks. I'm waiting for my computer to just behave. There we go. All right. Just so you guys know, I'm actively shopping for both a new desktop and a new laptop. I'm upgrading myself. All right. So let's look at the instructions in this document. So the first, unfortunately, by the time Christopher created this, now keep in mind, in the fall, this was working. And so here we are just a couple months later, and this is the nature of the web. If you follow this first link, you're going to go to this website, and you're going to notice all the instructions and all the stuff in here is all different. The menu items are different, but in order to get to where the member or participant countries are for this organization, you go to members, and then you go to national members. And then from there, like the example in the document is Albania. So you can click on Albania, and then you can start to dig in and start to find some of the information, but I want you to notice right up here, when you're looking for the resources, here they are, right? So the resources and the data. And Nick, did you figure this out eventually on your own, right? And is there any other areas you want to point out here that everybody should be aware of?
Not really. There's a couple of areas where obviously the websites have changed, but I think that's the only main one where I was completely stuck. Like it was very, very different. The other ones, if you just look at it for like a minute or so, you'll figure it out.
Okay. And my hope is to update those instructions. And I did have that intent, but it's just not how my life played out over the last week. But the whole point of this is to go to sites like this and start to look up data and how people are presenting the data and how they're formatting it, what they're showing to the public, what it really means. This is really what this assignment's about, if you guys haven't figured that out. And so that was the first section of it. So the Open Government Partnership, which is really kind of a fascinating organization in and of itself, assuming that governments are open to their citizens. What a profound thought, right? Since they're supposed to serve the citizens and actually be comprised of the citizens, but it's not always that way. The other piece here that they go into, and I don't know how many of you got to finish this, but they start navigating sites like data.gov. And this one has changed a little bit too, but I think it's a lot more like what's inside here. And so they want you to click on data. So you go to data, and then you can start digging in to all these data sets. Now, one of the reasons we're even including an assignment like this in this course, basically, is so that you guys are aware that there's so many repositories of data out there that are publicly available. Governments, ideally should be completely transparent, and in some cases they are. But I want you to notice that if you're looking for data sets, and you can pick, your topics here, you can see all these like weird things that they have in here. So maybe you want to know about the Directory of Nature Preserves or whatever it might happen to be, or the math test results for students from 2006 to 2012, just in case you're really interested. And then you can download that data in a variety of different formats. Notice the one format that we already know pretty well. The one that I'm seeing pop up here, which is kind of like new to me, is this RDF format. So that one would warrant a little bit of looking at. And I'm pretty sure I know what format that is. I think it's a variant of PDF, basically. But CSV, JSON, and XML are really pretty huge. For spreadsheet work and most of the stuff that data analysts do, CSV is still the format. But JSON and XML are often used as well. JSON is really heavy in web programming. So like when we're teaching our web students how to interface with data, JSON is usually the preferred format for moving things. And that's really just a variant of JavaScript is really what that is. But on any of these data sets, you can pull them down, look at them, et cetera, et cetera. So that's really kind of the point of the document. And Nick, did you find any other major flaws in the document that you want to report? Yeah.
Not really, no.
Yeah. So it's just really that first exercise that's kind of weird. Now, I don't know if you guys noticed, but maybe some of you hadn't completed this. I changed the due dates on the assignments a little bit to give you a little bit more time. Charles, you got a question?
Yeah, I had a question about the midterm.
Yes.
When is that due?
That's an excellent question, sir. Let's
Because
go ahead and
you
take
said to turn it in like before, we should try to finish it before next class.
Yeah,
You said.
that would be the idea. Yeah, 5:30 next Wednesday.
Okay, then I had a question. So like I just looked at it, and so say the first question is like, the most votes each state had, right? And obviously it's in the data, but like is the idea that we do that like programmatically, like have like if I updated the data for some reason, it would update the answer, like make a formula, or can I manually, like select Alaska and do max, or like, is there a specific way you want us to do that? Like,
Well,
put it in there?
You notice it's not specified.
Yeah, that's why I was
Right.
not sure.
And so it's kind of like, kind of giving somebody a credit card and saying, have fun. You know, the reality is, Charles, is there's a bunch of different ways to accomplish the same thing. So the most primitive way would be to look at the data manually and figure out which is the biggest one, right? And just report on it. But I would hope that you're catching on to the fact now that that's probably not the best way to do it, right? Because your eyes can deceive you. So you might want to write the formula, or you might just want to use the tools that Excel automatically. It has some of those automatic formula tools that we played with last week. That's up to you.
Okay, that's why I just wasn't sure.
Yeah, and what I'm really curious about is to see which choices you make. I know which choices I would make, but it might not be the same ones you would make. And so, and fascinatingly, I think this is a really interesting set of data, especially considering the election cycle that we just went through as a country. It was very bizarre. A lot of people hate the Electoral College for a lot of different reasons, but it does exist for a reason as well. And it's kind of interesting to kind of look at the data yourself. And this is one of the big takeaways. Like, you're always told about how the data is, but if you can get the raw data and you can analyze it yourself, you might draw some very different conclusions than what you're presented by whatever faction decides to present the information to you, right? Because data can also be slanted just in terms of what context you put it into. And that's what I think is fascinating. This data set does come from Kaggle. And another part of our unit today, frankly, and we are really out of time, to cover this stuff, but a lot of it was looking at the videos from LinkedIn. So I do hope that you watch these. It's not a super long watch, but Kaggle is one of those websites, and I have a link to it here, where you can come in here, and this is one of the most active open data set communities out there. Christopher and I just love this site to death, for a lot of different reasons. The one thing is, real big organizations share data here. So here's the Netflix list. And, this might actually even be updated now. It was updated 2 months ago, so it hasn't been updated recently. But sometimes you get into some of these projects and you get into all sorts of things. So some people sit here and write code, and they share it here. I think this is fascinating. There's also active discussions on some of the data. And then even more interestingly, sometimes you also get the metadata. In other words, like who provided it, how it was provided. And notice that this piece of data is actually automatically downloaded through this other site that's doing it. And it's considered public domain, and that's only because Netflix is sharing it. But Kaggle as a site is one of the coolest sites for data science, at least in terms of where to find data to work with. But don't ignore all the other ones that were in that document too. The government ones are always very particularly interesting. And then finally, there's this link that we created here and this document where, and I want you just to look at this list here. It's pretty extensive on some of the places where you can find data, and some of it might appeal to you intuitively and some of it might not. And the list goes on and on and on, right? And so there really is no shortage of data out there. The stuff that's publicly available, often people are not looking at it necessarily in ways that you might think about looking at it. So that's why it's always fun to have access to it directly.
I think it's kind of weird because I saw a couple of trends on there and I realized, I've used that a lot. I've seen people use that, all the time, but I don't really think about that as a data center. So
yeah, right. Exactly. And one thing that we'll get into as we start to move into Python, by the way, is the fact that, we can do what we call data scraping directly from websites. Even websites that don't natively share their data, you can sometimes still scrape the data from the website. And that's pretty interesting to do. All right, so that's kind of the roadmap here. We are kind of post-midterm, by the way, and so we're kind of in a little bit of a weird mode that way. And that's why I was a little bit more lenient with these due dates. Exercise 1 is set to the 15th, so you have until Monday. So you have ample time, folks, to work on this. The midterm, of course, we know is the 15th. And I think the database one, which you guys all pretty much completed just now, is due Saturday. So if you want to redo it again and practice, feel free. And I am actively working on doing connections to other database products for us to play with. And hopefully I'll get those working soon. But as I told you, technologically, they're a little bit more challenging. I was hoping to do MySQL tonight too, and that didn't work out. Where are we moving next? Well, I can give you a little bit of a roadmap here. It's not released yet, but we are going into Python next. So next week, we are going to review some of the stuff we just did to make sure everybody's good with it. And then in the second half of class, we're kind of going to do like the rapid fire remember Python kind of class. And we're going to just look at all the major components of Python, how you do variables, how you create an if statement, how do you create methods, what's an object, what's a loop, what's a list, what's a tuple, all those kind of things. And just to refresh the skills, and we'll have a little bit of practice with it. And then from there, and this one might change a little bit. We were having a debate on whether or not we're going to dive really heavy into GUI programming or not. We might just brush upon it rather than go real deep. But then following that, we go into Python libraries and data analytics, and then a final project. And the final project is related to COVID data. And last year when we first did this and the data was brand new, it's a very stark difference from what we have now, because now we have a year-long data set to look at. And it'll be really fun to do it. So that's kind of a roadmap for our future. So if you still have your old Python textbook, you might want to brush the dust off or find the ebook version of it, because we will be delving into it. I wouldn't say that you necessarily need to pre-study on it, but if you can, that would be cool. Just be a little bit of refresher, and then we're moving forward with it. So we're going to be learning new Python skills in the upcoming weeks, which would be a lot of fun. And so,
Could I ask?
Yes,
Could I ask why you would be brushing through one of the chapters?
I think you just misunderstood me. We're brushing through the materials or the major concepts of Python. So like what you should have learned in your Python class.
Yeah, about the chapter 9, like the GUI interfaces you'd said maybe aren't as important. Is there any reason for that?
Well, one of the reasons is basically this. We're not here necessarily to teach you completely how to program. It's more about doing data science through Python. That's important. And so because if I was to teach you GUI programming in depth, I could do a whole course on it easily, And so I don't want to delve too deeply into that, because then we get away from the data science aspects.
Sure. Okay.
That's the thinking. So we'll show you the basic GUI tools. And what's really neat about Python, frankly, is it's super easy to do GUI. It really is. And so, if you really want to dive deep on that, you can walk that path on your own. But we're not necessarily concerned with that as a primary feature. The primary feature are really the Python libraries that are built to do data analysis.
Gotcha.
And visualization.
Sure. Okay. Thank you.
All right, folks. That wraps the class for tonight.